Well, I am so excited to be joined now with the wonderful Veda Austin. And she is a very busy lady, having just gotten back from the US and getting caught up on her sleep, I'm sure. So Veda, thank you so much for joining this panel with Jim Garrison and my other compatriot, Patrick Durkin.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Veda, let's talk first a little bit about your background and what drew you to water in the first place.
hmm Well, it's always interesting when people talk about that because we're all bodies of water. By molecular count, not by volume, we're 99% water. Our eye lens is 99% water. We literally see the entire world through the lens of water. We were born through fluids. So it's not that water has been something that I haven't been aware of, but the more inner journey for me came from after having been in a horrendous car accident. We went under a 7-ton truck, rolled twice, and the driver died immediately. And it was one of the worst accidents in New Zealand where someone survived. If you see the state of the car, practically everybody says, I can't believe someone lived in that or through that. And over the course of time, I ended up having 8 surgeries because the seatbelt had crushed all my internal organs and shattered my collarbone. And on my 8th surgery for bowel surgery, I had the surgery, woke up, and all these doctors were standing around me. And they were saying, oh, you didn't recover well. You have showers of blood clots in your lungs. And so you're not going to survive. You're not going to live if you don't have this blood thinner. And so I was convinced to take warfarin for about 4 months. And after that 4 months, I went for an X-ray. They said, the clots are gone. We don't understand exactly why, other than perhaps it was the type of anesthetic or whatever. And so they said, we'd like you to continue on with the warfarin, potentially for the rest of your life. Now, I was in my early 20s, healthy, fit, well. I'd had children by then. I was also told that I would never be able to have children by 3 doctors. So I had a child for every doctor that told me I couldn't. Not out of defiance, obviously, but because they're all little miracles. So I knew my body could heal. I knew that my body was mine and that nobody could tell me what my body could or couldn't do. Really, I just have this way of putting things on the shelf and going, okay, it's over there, but that isn't my truth. So I'm just going to leave it there. So again, I did something which I thought was actually kind of radical, to say, no, I'm not going to do that, because I truly believed that my body could heal. So I ended up speaking to a friend of mine who was a medical doctor, but also practiced Ayurvedic medicine. And he said to me, if you can find a source of naturally, emphasis on natural, alkaline water, that might help to keep your body balanced. So I thought, well, water, that seems really simple and easy. There's plenty of that here in New Zealand, and most of the water in New Zealand coming out of springs is alkaline. So I put myself on 2-week trials. Didn't change my skincare or health or like any kind of dietary thing or any of those things. But I just drank alkaline water that came from springs. Every 2 weeks, I just did trials on each one. I gave one a good go. And I didn't notice anything much happen other than I felt more hydrated. Until one day, by this time I had a wellness center, this client came to me and she said, there's this old guy, he's got his own private source of water. It's 9.9 pH out of the ground. He's only giving it to cancer patients. He's having a lot of success. Maybe you want to try. So I went to see him, and he gave me a month's worth of water to try. On day 3, and to put it into context, I'm drinking 1 liter in the morning, an hour before eating, and 1 liter at night after having dinner. You shouldn't drink alkaline water with food. And so day 3, I noticed a change in bowel motions, which so many people don't want to talk about, which is an indicator of our internal health. I'm like, well, things are going good. And then on day 10, I had all these bumps coming up on my arm and along my jaw that was super painful. And I knew my body was purging, but I didn't exactly know what. And as gross as this sounds, there was this big bump that was sharp. It felt sharp. I ended up getting some tweezers and I pulled out this little shard of green glass. And between day 10 and 12, I pulled 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm and jaw that had been
Goodness.
embedded there for over 20 years. And so I'm like, how on earth is this possible? Because the only thing I'd done different was drink this beautiful, natural, high alkaline water from a deep aquifer here in New Zealand. And so I immediately went to the analysis. And when you look at an analysis, it tells you what the water holds. So it had a lot of high level of bicarb, and that's what made it alkaline. And it had some silica, it had this, it had this. And after a while, I thought, well, I feel like there's more here. I feel like I'm missing something. And then I started realizing that when you're looking at an analysis of water, all you're looking at is what water holds, not what water is. So then I thought, well, what is water? And then you could go and say, well, it's 2 hydrogens and an oxygen. But then someone suggested to me once an idea of which I thought was really interesting. They said, well, the 2 hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen are masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create balance on Earth. And I really liked those insights. And then I started to research more and more and more about water. And I started to realize that water never used to be called water. It was called the waters, because in ancient times, people understood water to be a living being. Think about even how the words we use. It's a body of water, the mouth of the river, the headwaters. And when Romans brought plumbing into being, people started to see their waste get and take away by water. And waters, or the waters, was being reduced to water. And now we even go to H2O. But where in our English language waters still resonates, outside of biblically, is where we say her waters broke. There is a trickling down of this ancient information. So that's kind of what got me curious about water. And then I started to read more about people's work with water, like Dr. Gerald Pollack's The Fourth Phase of Water. And of course, people know about Masaru Emoto, although he wasn't embraced by the scientific community. He opened the door for people to see themselves as water bodies, sensitive to thoughts and sounds and environment. And then there's a man called Laurent Costa, and his work inspired me a lot. So he was looking down the microscope in a similar way to Emoto, but he didn't want to experiment on the water because, in his opinion, the water was his spiritual teacher. And so sometimes he'd smile at the water before he flash froze it and photographed the ice crystals that formed. And he was seeing smiley faces back. He was seeing hearts. He was seeing images, pictures relative to his thoughts or things that had happened in his day. And art is a very unique thing. He also saw geometries. But for the most part, most people, when they think about beautiful water in a crystallographic form, they tend to go to the geometries they saw in Emoto's work. But Laurent's work, he wrote a book called Journey into the Heart of Water with this perfect heart on the cover that he saw in the microscope. And I would say that art is a very human thing. It is also a very sophisticated way of translating information that you feel and that you see. And that if you go back to times where the cave people were drawing pictures, expressing what they were seeing, and it's a communication, it's a language, and that water was designing in these very clear pictures fascinated me. And so I'm a water researcher, but I used to be an artist. Well, I'm still an artist. I just haven't painted in a while. So I worked professionally as an oil painter for many years. And so I see the world through a lens of art. And so that was interesting. And then there was a man called Thomas Hieronymus. And this is the person probably who inspired me to begin my work, my journey with crystallography, freezing water in a very specific way. Not through a microscope was I taking photos, but I'm taking photos on my iPhone because the work is macroscopic. And so Hieronymus was a radionic engineer. He went into a Parisian meat market on a very cold day and observed that the freshly placed organs of an animal appeared to be affecting the way the frost froze on the glass behind where they were placed. For example, the frost would freeze into the shape of a liver organ above a liver organ, and so on and so forth. And his hypothesis was there seemed to be a life force energy emanating out of these organs, and he thought that was because there was water in the blood. So he thought of water as life force energy, and I often refer to it as that. And so in each organ, there is something called a sonic signature. It's like a cymatic imprint of form and function. And so he thought that the water was always communicating with itself in different stages, and I believe I've seen that too. There's no place where water isn't in communication with itself or communion with itself. And so he thought that the water in the blood was sharing the information of form with the water in the air, and the water in the air took that information when it hit the glass, took on the shape and form. And that was inspiring to me because he wasn't using a microscope. And so I thought, well, that's good. Maybe I'm just going to project a thought into a glass petri dish because I've been working with petri dishes for another project. I used the water that helped heal me, and I was going to project a thought into the water much like Emoto had done. Because that seemed to be the most kind of etheric, I suppose, idea. Because I wanted to just see if anything would happen. I had no idea whether or not it would. And so I had my dish and I'm like, okay, I'm going to think of something. And whilst I was thinking about what I was going to think about, there was a bit of fluff floating around in the dish. So I put my hand in, took out the fluff, and I thought, I wonder if my hand will have any impact on the water's quote unquote memory, because I didn't know if that was true. So that thought will do. And I shoved it into the freezer with the peas and broccoli and everything else. And that was when I froze water solid. Pulled it out, and a few hours later, held it up to the light and got my very first photo of now 55,000 photos of water responding in the most incredibly intelligent way. The image that I saw was of an X-ray-like hand, but not just any hand. I inherited my mother's crooked fingers on these two sides, and the fingers were crooked on those fingers of the hand. And so I was really freaked out because it looked just like a hand, and I wasn't expecting that at all. And I showed my son, and I said, what does this look like to you? And he said, it looks like a creepy X-ray hand, Mum. And I'm like, yeah, it does. And so then I went to the beach, collected some seawater, and tentatively stood outside the freezer going, oh my God, what am I going to see? If I see something, maybe this isn't random. And I got an image of a fish with gills and scales and tail and eye and everything. And then my freezer became my most used household appliance. And I saw images and images and images. And then towards the end of a year, and I know I've gone way, way deep into a very simple question that you asked me, because I'd quite like to get more into the more esoteric work that I've done, but to give a bit of an idea of how this came about, after a year, I learned more about the fourth phase of water. And that has different properties, this type of water. It absorbs more light, which really interests me. It has a negative charge. It has more of an ordered molecular structure. And so you can find this type of water in your cells, but you can also find this type of water in the stage between liquid and solid, and also in the melting stage. So I started to open my freezer earlier and earlier to see when the images were starting to form. And at about 5 minutes, 20 seconds, there was liquid on top and ice underneath. I pulled the dish out, tipped the liquid away, and photographed the crystallography that stuck to the dish. At this stage, the water has pushed the solates out, the salts and the minerals and anything that's not serving it as well, out. So it's a very thin layer of very clear, negatively charged plasmatic water. So it is like an ice, but not exactly. It's an in-between stage. It's only about 3 millimeters thick, sometimes less, which allows a lot of light to come through. But it was a quantum leap from my year of freezing water solid. I was able to see imagery that was three-dimensional, that was so clear. There was absolutely no doubting that the imagery was what I was seeing, then things that were relative to the influence or the inspiration. And now I look back at my work when I did it all those 10 years ago, when I first began, and I am amazed that I got the kind of imagery that I did now that I know this technique.
Mm. Wow. Wow. That's a beautiful story. And you're just getting started in a way. I know it's been 10 years, but this technique and it really knows no bounds, right? You just so do you want to show a few slides so people can have a sense of this if they haven't seen your incredible work before? And while you're doing that, I'll just tell everybody you can go to vedaaustin.com and I'll spell it out when we're in the show. But there are a series of interviews that Veda has done there, and some of them are quite extensive in her presentation. We're just going to do a little snippet today, but I highly encourage you to check out some of her 55,000 photographs because they're absolutely amazing.
Thank you. And we are going to go on a quick little journey here because I like this term, the living waters. We've heard this biblically. I just mentioned about the waters, but the living part's really interesting because the definition of living is something that is alive, something that can grow, move, reproduce, something that can carry out various cellular activities. Water expands and grows within and around an embryo. Water moves, water carries out various cellular activities. So even within the definition of living, there is a definition of water. So this is Emoto's work. It was so much in contrast. So people, were able to get a feeling for what he was trying to present through these images. This is some examples of Laurent Costa's work. So as you can see, you see these smiley faces, the heart, and then this one over here, which is like this little rabbit or cat. I can't remember what the story was around that one.
So cute.
And even this is his work where he put his water bottle on top of a book of Da Vinci's work and got this ice crystal, which is really remarkable. And I do like to show this because I think it's important for people to see that it isn't just me that's getting imagery.
Right.
Okay.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So this is the very first ice image I ever got. And you can see that it has a very clear image of a hand on it. And this is the way it looked straight out of the freezer. Now, to put into context, I'm not talking about something that is pareidolia, which is where you look at something like a crack in the wall and you make it out to be a face. So Dr. Jerry Pollack, he invited me to do a questionnaire. And we put 25 photos together. And it just said, what does this image look like to you? I circulated it through social media via other people. So people didn't know it came from me. And they didn't know that what they were even looking at, that it was ice. And there were 297 people that did the survey, and 85% of people could recognize the images for what the influence was. And there were 3 where 100% of people could recognize the images, and the hand was one of them.
Wow.
Okay, so this was the fish. Now you'll see it, the textures look different, and that is because I had collected the seawater from a puddle, and so it looks quite different when it's frozen seawater than fresh water. It gets a lot more texture, but you can see the outline of the fish with the fins, with the eye, with the tail. This is the difference between my old technique and my new technique. Over here, this was done by my son Rama. He's named after Lord Rama. He's part Indian. And so what he did was trying to convince me, in the process of trying to con me into getting him a bow and arrow, he said to me, look, if I can get an arrow in the ice, will you get me a bow and arrow? And I'm like, points for ingenuity, Rama. Okay, well, okay. He knew my new technique by this time. And so he did the whole thing himself, even took the photo himself. What he did literally was imagine that he was shooting an arrow into the water. He pulled back the imaginary arrow, shot it into the water, froze it, pulled it out, and this is his image, not mine.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
That's
Wow.
remarkable.
I would say water was on his side in this pursuit.
Yeah, he is a powerful manifestor, that boy. Now you might be wondering what this is. So this is the 3 stages of freezing that I've identified. Now this is the stage where there's ice and there's water, and that's the stage where you take it out of the freezer and tip the liquid away. Now here where you've got an ice sandwich with water in the middle, and this is a solid, I think of it as spirit, blood, and body.
Mm.
So why I think this, I think that there is a very spiritual aspect to the stage of water that I take the water out, the ice out. So the stage of freezing.
Uh-huh.
And there's multiple reasons I think that, which we can get into. This is a video of someone that someone took in the freezer. So this is the stage where I take the water out. This is sped up, but this is after about 5 or 6 minutes. So you can see very clear imagery. Now I'm going to get into hydroglyphs soon. So there's 3 ways that I see that water communicates. One is through signature patterns. So you can identify the type of water it is by the patterns it forms. Art, and I always say that art is the heart of water. That's what most people know my work from. And then hydroglyphs. And a hydroglyph is a symbol in ice that I have seen repeat at least 50 times using the same word influence. And I have used the same word in lots of different languages. And I would say that water isn't reading words, but it absorbs the energy of words and reverse engineers the energy of that word back to a kind of living principle that is in a symbolic form that you can see, photograph, and even eat.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're going to see next are 2 things happening that look like they're happening at the same time. There's a blackish bubble coming from the top, and then this washing down the bottom. The black bubbles are actually in between. The washing is the top layer. And when you see how this all works, it actually shows you very clearly how amazing it is that you get imagery in solid frozen form compared to the very early stage where you could clearly see all of the imagery much clearer. So it's the black part are the salts and minerals, and also any other thing that's in the water. That's what makes ice cloudy. If you use distilled water, you have clear ice.
Uh-huh. That's interesting. Huh.
So here are the 3 ways that water communicates. These are different signature patterns. So up here, what I call star fern hexagons, that is what water looks like from a spring, collected and frozen within an hour. This is what rainwater looks like, collected and frozen within an hour. This is what any water that's gone through a filter looks like. This is tap water. And tap water can vary depending on where it is and all various different factors, but often you see a lot of disorder. And then you have seawater. Now, if I can zoom in a little bit here, you might see that seawater has lots of these tiny little stars that are indented, and they all have that, and they are like little tiny star-shaped subwoofers. So you get to understand signature patterns. Then this is an example of art where I've used a picture which I've printed out, cut out, and put under my dish for 30 seconds, removed and frozen using my method. Now, this was the result. And this is a quick example of hydroglyphs where you see you have repeated patterns. And this is from using the word marriage. But we have also come to understand that the same symbol appears using the word ring. And there have been lots of reasons why I have used marriage and ring. And a lot of my hydroglyph work has come from seeing how water responds to music, in that it likes to pick up on words. Some examples of my work will be here. This is an iconic photo of my friend Wendy, and water designed her face, because I thought, well, water seems to like to design an imagery. What if I show faces? Will it show different faces? Will it show the features of different faces? So I thought a little further along with this one. I thought, what happens if I show water the ice image of the face? So this is what I did, and this is the result. It designed a negative of the face.
Amazing. Wow.
Wonderful to show that it's not random. And then
Yeah.
I took this image, and then this is the image that I got. And there's still a face, although it's just not as clear as here, but it's starting to change. But you see that the image is held. And then this is a bunch of different people's faces where I've done the same thing. This is from a lady who was pregnant, who drank some of the water and left me some. And this is the imagery that I got in the ice. You can even see a hand. She was holding her tummy whilst thinking about it. You can see
Oh,
this
wow.
hand. And what I've noticed with embryos or anything to do with spirit is that you see this light, this different, unique kind of light showing. And this was the image that she sent me after her ultrasound the next day.
Wow.
This is to show that images stay, hold. So I find this one interesting because it didn't show the face, but it focused on the attive crown. And here's the other one, and this is the first image. Then I let this melt and then refroze it. And you can see that the imagery held, it stayed in the water. This is just various different imagery. This is an interesting one, which is it shows you an example of hydromancy. So I put my thumb in the water, obviously removed it and froze. And you can see there is a thumb in the ice with a nail, but you can also see that there is a chip in the nail. I chipped my nail in exactly the same place 3 hours later after having done this ice work. Here you can just see various different images relative to anatomy. This one is the first image I got. I let this melt and refroze it, and this is the second. You can see different colors because I did them at different times of the day. I actually like to play with the background colors, and I have to turn my dish of ice to wherever the light is best. Images of animals, of the animal kingdom. And so you can see in this one, the dog had actually smelled the water prior to freezing, and it designed his nose. There's stories behind each one. But I know we want to get into a lot of conversation, so I won't spend too much time going into all the stories. Again, this is where the ice has held the imagery. This was the first ice image, then I let it melt, and this is the refrozen one. This is where I've put physical things in the water, and I've a little bit of focus on things that are human-made, man-made, as opposed to natural, to see how water might respond to those. And then various different places where I've placed the dish on top of the guitar, and water has designed various different images that seem to be relevant. This is an interesting one over here. You can see the consistency of the eggs from putting an egg or 2 eggs in the ice. It's 2 here. But in this one, you can see here, there's the egg, there's the results. And this one, I got given the eggs by somebody I know who had free range chickens on their property and would give me eggs, but you could never tell if they were fertilized or not. And so you can't tell until you crack it open and you look at the yolk, and there's a little kind of a blood spot on the yolk. So with this one, I noticed there was something different about it, but when I cracked it open, I realized that this was actually a fertile egg. So water seemed to know before I did. Lots of ways that water responds to words. Now, I think this is really interesting. I've used different languages here. This is Pugio, which is Latin for dagger. This is Pyar in Hindi, which means love. You're getting the heart. And this one's kind of interesting because I used the word ego, which is a conceptual word. It's not that you can buy ego at the store. It's not something that you visualize for the word ego, but it designed big shoulders and neck, a little face, and a big balloon head, which
Oh,
really is
perfect.
artificial intelligence, really interesting. Conception. I mean, it looks like an egg with a sperm inside.
Look at that. Wow.
So consistency, where I'm using the word crop circle. And, you can see there's clear image each time that where I'm doing this. And here I asked water if it knew my name, and it designed my initials, VA. This is how I write them. I never showed water that. That's just how it looked.
Oh my
Here,
gosh.
here I said, what was my name at birth? So I hadn't formed how I designed my initials at that point, so it's a separate VA. But this is a hydroglyph, these two circles touching, for conception. And this one circle means complete. Complete conception is actually what is written here. And
Huh.
this is where I asked the same question, do you know my name? And I fell asleep on the couch and it overfroze, but you can still see the VA. Now over here, I asked water if it knew my Indian names, because I was born with two Indian names, Veda and Karan is my middle name. And so I got a VK, and up here is what looks like Hindi.
Huh.
I'd
Wow.
love anybody actually reads Hindi. If that means anything to you, it would be great to know. um, Over here, I was asking I often don't have a specific intention with water these days because I've been doing this for so long. I'm more interested in what water wants to show me. So sometimes I will just freeze water with no intention. But before I froze the water over here, my cat Luna was just constantly wanting to go in or out. She couldn't make her mind up. I said, "Are you in or are you out? Are you in or are you out?" And I got in in the ice. Over here, I asked water, "Who are you?" Now, if you make it out, this is an I-A-M. So it wrote, I am. And this is from playing the song Fly Me to the Moon. F-L-Y. Now, over here, this was from somebody else who learnt my technique, but had also overfrozen it. She asked a very poignant personal question. Should I stay or should I go? And she fell asleep. And when she came to the freezer, her answer was there.
This one blew me away when I saw it online. It's
Really
like,
incredible.
wow.
It blew everyone away. I mean, including me. People think they get used to this, but I really don't. And here where I spoke the word Yeshua prior to
Wow.
freezing, and I got this really amazing vessel, like a cup of kinds. But I did notice there was something that stood out to me that was a little bit unusual up here, which I always go for things that look a little different. And so I zoomed in on it and looked at this. So then I basically put that on social media, and I got over 1,000 people respond because I said, does this look like any language or anything to you? And everybody sent me this. Basically, it is Hebrew for Yeshua. I mean, that one really, really blew me away. And then
Wow.
this kind of chalice or cup of
Oh
kinds.
my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's stunning.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning.
Oh, sorry, going the wrong way. This is some work of other people just to show it's not just me. There's all kinds of reasons why there's there's nail clippers there. My friend John is able to freeze outside. He lives in Utah where it gets freezing, and his nail clippers were beside his petri dish, and he watched it form. A lot of this is done by children as well. It's just to show that it's not random,
Yeah.
and that other people are seeing imagery too. This one is interesting. This lady drank some water, held her dish, sort of spilled or not spat, but poured the water from her mouth back into the dish.
Huh.
why is it like this? Because she just had her tongue pierced.
Oh my gosh. Oh, Jesus. Oh my gosh. I was
Yeah.
saying it could have been a tongue, but it was separated. There you
Yeah.
go.
This is one of the most interesting things that water has taught me, and I can sort of go and get it to a part where we can get into some more interesting, well, not that none of this is interesting, but some stuff that perhaps we'll all find interesting on a really deep esoteric level, perhaps. But I think this is a really important one. It shows that water reads potentials, and by molecular count, as I've mentioned, we're 99% water. So water is always reading our potential. And I would say always reading our best potential, our highest potential. So here we have the sunflower seed, and here we have the result. Water has designed the outcome of the seed. Now, it surprised me when I learned that even dried up old seeds still have approximately 10% of water inside of them. So the next one shows the same thing with a flax seed. It designed the pod, the fruit of the flax, which is also where the seeds come from. And here, the same thing with an apple seed. It designed the apple. This was the apple I used. And this is interesting because I let that melt. I refroze it a day later. And then I refroze this 3 days later, which shows how it holds information. But when I put a pistachio shell with no nut in it, it only designed the shell.
Huh.
So I do want to quickly show what a hydroglyph looks like, because I think hydroglyphs give us a window into a language of water that we might have never imagined was possible. So I was doing lots of genres of music to show my son that water liked to pick up on information, that it wasn't in judgment. My son saw Emoto's work, and we have to be careful with contrasts. Humans are really addicted to seeing the best and worst of things. If you show a child the best and worst of something and they can't identify with either, sometimes they'll assume the worst. My son saw that water only, from Emoto's work, in his opinion, he came to me and said, I think water hates me. Water only likes classical music and John Lennon and hates heavy metal. And he didn't like heavy metal, but he liked Tupac. And he said, and Tupac swears, and therefore I think water hates me. And I said, well, it's probably the people that did the work that might not have liked that kind of music. And perhaps that's what water was picking up on. I don't believe that water is ever in judgment. Humans are. And we might be bodies of water made up of such a lot of this very special water, but we're still confined to a body that includes having fears and thoughts and our own judgments. And so when water is free of a body, it has a different energy completely. It is freed from the bonds of fear and of opinion. And so what I have seen, though, is that it will respond to imagery. Now, I want to really get into that topic a little of what I've just said, because I've seen that distilled water doesn't design clear or complex imagery. And that is because I think of water, distilled water, more as being an observer only. But I don't use distilled water because of that reason. I use spring water, water that does have salts and minerals in it, just like we do as human beings. So that enables it to store information, have what we term as memory, if you will, but it's also able to observe. It has both qualities. It can be the observer as well as the active participant.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have this huge body of information now of water responding to different words and different songs. So this is an example where I saw that water seemed to respond in imagery relative to the word in Stairway to Heaven. So it just kept designing the stairway. And after seeing this, I began to wonder, does it mean stairway? I wrote the word stairway and put the dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds. I use that number because it's not too long and not too short. Remove, freeze, and I kept seeing these stairway images. Now I did that 50 times, over 50 times, and I kept seeing that. And I thought, well, what do you do with a stairway? So I wrote the words climb up, and I saw the stairway, and I did that 50 times over the course of several months. And I then realized that, oh, what happens if I write the words climb down? And I didn't see it. I didn't see the stairway for that. Now, I also did the thing where some people were like, Stairway to Heaven's meant to mean some, if you play it backwards, it's meant to be some demonic kind of a deal. So when I played it backwards, I didn't get any imagery at all. So water doesn't play in any realm that I found of negativity. It doesn't design complex in any complex way. But I'm not saying that playing it backwards was negative. I'm just saying it wasn't a coherent voice. So
Yeah.
water did not design.
Yeah,
So here,
I think that's the word, the coherence. And Veda, I just want to say we only have a few more minutes. So I want to, maybe we can just chat for a second.
sounds perfect.
Because the implications of everything that you've shown today are so huge. And it is something that I've found, I mean, when I have watched and listened to you in other interviews, I've become so excited because of how it completely aligns with what I've been doing as well. And finding this consciousness of water and how it has the ability to inform us all the time, and how we can interact with it, and in communication we work with our own water in our bodies, work with I mean I wish we had more time, because one of the things you said in a previous interview was that water won't always cooperate with you. You need to be in a certain state to be able to do these experiences. And that is so helpful for all of us to know, and why it's so important to keep ourselves in a state where we can do these experiments, or even just to keep our own psyches and our own bodies in a positive, receptive situation. So I just, I mean, the fact that water is prescient, it knew you were going to chip your fingernail, right?
Mm.
It reads the potential. It knows that a seed is going to become this magnificent pattern, this incredible geometry, and so much more. And I just want to kind of, I think we could talk for hours. Really, we could. But there was something that I heard Dr. Emoto say in an interview once, and it was a conclusion that I was already on the brink of going there myself. He didn't ever write it. He stopped just shy of writing, you know, that water might be what we, to use another word, use God or source or whatever, that water could be that great unifying principle that we've been staring at in the face and using without consciousness for forever. Maybe not back in previous days when they recognized it as living waters, but um, the potential here for water to be really divine is I mean, I just think it's right there.
I,
So just, yeah, go ahead.
I would just say that, I think that water is a divine truth, and that there is so much indicators now to me to suggest that divinity flows through water in
Yeah,
every single way, in every manifestation,
yeah,
and that ultimately we are what we've been looking for.
yeah.
And when we look in a puddle, we see what we've been looking for. And we also see that perhaps from seeing this work, maybe water sees us. Water sees us in a way that um, if I wish we could see ourselves,
Mm,
because there is no judgment in that mirror.
mm. So beautifully said, so beautifully said. And I hope that you and I can have a chat someday where we don't have time boundaries, because we're so on the same page. And I thank you so much for what you're going around the world talking about, showing on your social media and on your website, because I think it is one of the keys to how we're going to be able to live better as we go forward. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure.